Good afternoon. The hearing will come to order. I want to thank everybody for being here today, and I think we're live on C-SPAN. Are we live on C-SPAN, or are we broadcast later? So if we can watch it tonight, it'll put us to sleep. Yeah. Again, thank everybody for being here today. The House Armed Services Committee panel on business challenges in the defense industry meets today to continue our dialogue regarding the health and future of our nation's defense industrial base by receiving testimony from witnesses from the Department of Defense. While the Weapons System Acquisition Reform Act did much to increase transparency and foster competition, there is still a great deal of room for improvement in the Department of Defense business practices. Last Monday, the panel heard from policy experts and from various think tanks that have studied the structure, effectiveness, and efficiency of the defense industrial base. Our witnesses last week pointed out that our nation lacks a coherent and complete strategy for our nation's defense. Without such a strategy, the defense industrial base is left without the guidance and transparency necessary to ensure viability and efficiency. This panel is facing some complex issues, and nothing illuminates that more than the RAND study on military research and development policy, which I think I'm going to carry around with me from here on out. I think it does a very good job of laying out the complexity of the issues as it offers some findings and recommendations of policy providing the military with new weapons and capabilities. The only problem with this RAND study is it's from 1958, so we're still talking about the same problems 50 years later. So that's what this panel wants to take a look at and change the way we are for the betterment for our nation and our Department of Defense and for the warfighter especially. As a panel, we traveled to Akron, Ohio on Friday, where we met with small and mid-sized businesses working on highly technical solutions to deliver capabilities to our warfighter. We met with companies making advanced coatings to prevent corrosion, composite armor, advanced aerodynamic control systems, and technologies to enable remote detection and identification of pathogens. Just like in 1958, our defense industry today is having a hard time getting clear requirements from the DoD, bridging the gap between development and fielding, and surviving overly burdensome, unresponsive program management policies and regulations. Navigating these issues is difficult for large defense contractors and near impossible for small businesses. Today's hearing is an opportunity for us to hear from these critical issues from witnesses from the Department of Defense. I'd like to introduce first the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Manufacturing and Industrial Base Policy, Mr. Brett Lambert. Thank you for being here, Mr. Lambert. And Mr. Anthony Gudger. See, I've been practicing that too. Who's the Director of the Office of Small Business Programs in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. Again, welcome. I look forward to hearing your testimony and frank discussion. But before we receive testimony, I'd also like to take a minute to thank Congresswoman Betty Sutton and her dedicated staff for hosting the panel in Akron. It was an extremely informative visit. In addition to the roundtable with industry, we also had a remarkable discussion on the impact of corrosion on DoD's equipment and facilities, and got a briefing on the University of Akron's unique program in corrosion research and engineering. On the trip, I learned that the Department of Defense spends nearly $23 billion a year dealing with corrosion. That's $23 billion out of a defense budget that we're not spending on our troops, and it's something that I think that all members of the panel and the Armed Services Committee need to be aware of. So I want to thank Betty for bringing this important issue to our attention. Our next field roundtable will be happening on Friday, December 9th in Congressman John Running's district, the 3rd District of New Jersey. These sessions are invaluable to this panel's work, and I hope all our panel members have an opportunity to join us on that trip. At this time, I turn it over to our ranking member, Mr. Larson, if he has any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm pleased to be joining you and the other panel members here today. As we've discussed, this panel aims to discover the challenges facing the current defense industry partnership and the capabilities they produce, and based on that RAND report, perhaps solving them at some point as well. Small businesses are essential to a robust and agile industrial base, as well as for a strong economy. The U.S. defense base has a long history of producing the best military systems in the world. We have to ensure that this continues, both for our warfighter and as well because it does create jobs here in the U.S. Key aspects of a strong defense industrial base include assuredness of supply, American jobs, and ensuring the best technology for the warfighter. The mission of the manufacturing and industrial base policy is to monitor, preserve, and enhance the national security industrial base of the United States. As we know, small businesses play a critical role in the strength of our economy by creating technologies for many folks, including our warfighter. We need to ensure that our small businesses are given every opportunity to compete on a level playing field with larger businesses. Over the past few months, we've heard that small businesses face challenges regarding security clearances, lead times from DoD contract solicitation to submission due dates, ITAR regulations, defense auditing, and other regulatory and procedural issues. I am pleased with what we've learned so far from our first panel hearing that looked at challenges our small and medium-sized businesses are having creating and maintaining opportunities within the Department of Defense. Testimony from that hearing was echoed during our district visits and roundtable discussions. In addition, comments from local leaders have been extremely helpful. So far, this panel has met with business leaders in my congressional district in August. We visited Rock Island Arsenal in early October in Mr. Schilling's district. And last week, I and other panel members met with industry leaders in and around Ms. Sutton's district in Akron, Ohio. Connecting today's hearing with our hearing on October 24th, where we discussed the role and the future of the defense industrial base with witnesses from think tanks, we'll hear today what DoD is doing to improve the defense business environment with a particular focus on small business. So I look forward today to hearing today's testimony, and thank you all for being here. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. And with that, we'll start with Mr. Lambert. If you would, proceed.
Chairman Schuster, Congressman Larson, and members of the panel and staff, thank you for the opportunity to submit our written testimony on behalf of the Department regarding maintaining a healthy and productive defense industrial base. I'm Brett Lambert, the Deputy Assistant for Defense for Manufacturing and Industrial Base Policy. Let me begin by defining what we mean by the term defense industrial base, because I think the definition is important. The defense industrial base is comprised of an extremely diverse set of companies that both provide products and services directly and indirectly to the national security agencies, including the military. References to, quote, the defense industrial base that imply some monolithic entity are not analytically useful. The defense industrial base includes companies of all shapes and sizes, resourced from around the globe, from some of the world's largest public companies to sole proprietorships to garage startups. Some companies deal directly with the federal government, while the vast majority act as suppliers, subcontractors, and service providers in a value chain that leads to those prime contractors. Companies at any tier and at any size may offer critical or hard-to-produce products that ultimately lead to the systems used by our warfighters. Some products and services sold by companies in the defense industrial base are unique to defense applications alone, while most have substantial levels of non-defense demand or are even sold exclusively on commercial terms, such that the supplier may not even know that the product is used in our military systems. And likewise, the military may not know it depends upon a primarily commercial component. Finally, while the pace of innovation is extremely rapid in some segments across our base, other segments are based on mature technologies where dynamic innovation is less important to the department. In short, there's not a single defense industrial base. There is a defense market served by a diverse selection of companies which span and often reflect the greater global economy for goods and services. The U.S. military's superior operational capabilities are enabled by this diverse base, and for decades the U.S. has commanded a decisive lead in the quality of the defense-related research and engineering conducted globally and in the military capabilities and products that flow from this work. However, these advantages have enabled American preeminence in the defense technology are not a birthright, and the key elements of that base are necessary to ensure U.S. dominance on future battlefields must be sustained and nurtured. The U.S. defense industrial base is critical to equipping our military with superior capabilities, and a strong, technically vibrant, financially successful industry is therefore in the national interest. As the era of sustained growth in defense budgets comes to an end, the Pentagon's stewardship responsibility to ensure access to robust industrial base becomes more challenging. The department needs to adapt its industrial base considerations and actions to emerging fiscal realities. In the past 2 years, we've made significant increase in efforts to address the implications of the changes in both budgets and the nature of the industry. We understand that America relies on the defense industry that is healthy, robust, and innovative, and the department appreciates that businesses must be motivated by the opportunity to make reasonable profit. Indeed, leveraging the inherent motivations to allow companies that perform well to increase profit levels above a mean is in the department's interest. Likewise, individual companies that do not provide the government with quality products that meet our requirements on time at a reasonable cost should expect to make reduced profits. In the high budget environments of the past, many companies have grown to expect high margins independent of quality. As budgets shrink, this practice must end. As the budget environment changes, we do expect some niche firms to face difficulty due to decreased demand. In such cases, we attempt to identify early warning signs through a variety of means, to isolate and, if necessary, mitigate these issues, particularly if a firm offers truly critical, unique, and necessary capabilities. While to date these cases have been isolated, we must nonetheless be prepared for the occasion to tailor our investment policies to preserve essential capabilities, and we need sufficient insight to make these choices. Toward that end, we've undertaken an aggressive effort to map and assess the industry sector by sector and tier by tier. I can go into more detail during the question and answers on this particular effort. Finally, the Department relies on a variety of investment tools to directly sustain and improve discrete critical industrial capabilities. Program offices routinely manage industrial base issues as part of their programs to keep them on track. One key mechanism we also have at OSD is the Manufacturing Technology, or ManTech, applied research programs. The Department also preserves critical capabilities through R&D investments, life type of purchase of materials and components, and acquisition strategy choices that sometimes give roles to multiple companies rather than rely on single suppliers. Another example of the industrial base investment the Department is working on is in partnership with 18 civil acquisition departments and agencies on initiatives to preserve and create essential domestic capabilities through forums such as the Defense Production Act Committee. Our commitment to working with industry, however, does not mean the Department should underwrite sunset industries or prop up poor business models. It does mean the Department will create an environment in which our vital industrial capabilities, a foundation of our strength, can thrive and continue to provide our warfighters with the best systems available at a reasonable cost. Congress has been actively involved in shaping and supporting many of these initiatives on this front, and the support has been both welcomed and appreciated. Congress has also supported the Department's engagement with industry, affording the Department the flexibility necessary to maintain a healthy industrial base. And on behalf of the Department, we appreciate this support and look forward to our continued partnership to best serve the warfighters and our taxpayers while maintaining a financially healthy and technologically superior industrial base. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. And with that, Mr. Gunger, I got it.
Thank you, Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member Larson, and members of the panel. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about the Defense Industrial Base and the role that small business play within the Department of Defense. My name is Andre Gudger, and I'm the Director in the Department of Defense for Office Small Business Programs, and I report to the Undersecretary for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. The Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics is the principal staff element of the Secretary of Defense for all matters to DoD acquisition. Today, I will discuss the role of small business programs and some of our initiatives in tracking the small business goal. The primary role of the Office of Small Business Programs is to advise the Secretary of Defense on all things small business. This includes policy, oversight, and meeting statutory and regulatory requirements. The Office of Small Business Programs work hard to advocate for small businesses for inclusion in the acquisition process, the creation of awareness, and the dynamic role that small business play in our nation's economy. In September 2011, Secretary Leon Panetta issued a memo to the acquisition workforce emphasizing the importance to the entire Department of Defense on meeting its small business goals and showing the commitment of DoD's leadership in supporting small business. This was unprecedented. There has never been a Secretary of Defense to sign out a memo for small business in the Department's history, and the Secretary of Defense took it that serious where he signed it out while he was on vacation. So when I look at the activities that the Department of Defense has outlined for the Small Business Program Office, we maintain 3 essential programs that is our base for creating opportunities for small business. The first one is the Mentor Protege Program, where small businesses can receive a one-time developmental assistance from a larger company on developing their future capability. The other program that we manage is the Small Business Innovation Research and Technology Transfer Programs, which is one of the most successful small business programs in the country, where This creates an opportunity for companies where we fund them to develop technologies, solutions, and services to meet the urgent needs of the department. And lastly, our Indian Incentive Program, where we provide opportunity to Indian-based companies. When I think about the outreach that we have provided around the country, I've personally hosted several roundtables throughout the country looking for new ideas on increasing small business participation in our contracting process and making it for companies easier to do business with the department. We've hosted 2 large-scale outreach events with our Deputy Secretary. At the time, he was the Undersecretary for Acquisition Technology and Logistics, Dr. Ashton Carter, where we offer matchmaking opportunities in the department. And we plan on continuing this engagement because it was successful for us, and we will continue in future years. In addition to the outreach with community, we've also have opened the door in the department where we've been engaging other stakeholders in the Department of Defense and a more coordinated effort on the opportunities and the value that small business bring, and looking at including them in the overall central programs in the future of the department and the direction that we're going. As I previously mentioned, that Secretary Panetta issued a memo to the acquisition workforce. The military secretaries also issued a memo to their workforces about the importance of small business, meeting the goals and the inclusion of small businesses in our direction as we continue to build capability. When I look at the next thing, our regulatory changes, one part of the OSBP initiatives was to create an opportunity where we recognize access to capital was a challenge for most small businesses, so we made a change in the DFARS to allow for accelerated payments to small business, which was tremendous. And we, with this change, were able to pay small business 1/3 earlier, faster than they normally would get paid on average. And we're looking to continue this in FY12, and this put billions of dollars in the small business pockets. And this was used to allow them to hire workers, expand their capabilities, and look for ways to participate in new contracting opportunities more rapidly. Next, we commissioned studies. One of the first studies I commissioned was a reduction of barriers for service-disabled and veteran businesses so that we could reduce barriers to allow them to participate at a much higher level as they continue to develop their capability set within the Department of Defense. One of the next things we also did was the accountability. We have included small business evaluation criteria and senior execs who influence acquisition outcomes in the Department of Defense, and particularly in acquisition technology and logistics. And furthermore, we're looking at additional ways to include assessing ways of determining subcontract achievement for the department as well. And finally, I would like to talk about the impact in our current environment. The continuing resolution has a significant impact on us because our programs are impacted by the defense budget, and with the amount of uncertainty, small businesses tend to not invest and make key hires for the future. In conclusion, I'd like to thank the panel for allowing me to speak today. As you can see, our programs and initiatives have focused on increasing small business utilization through reducing barriers and streamlining the acquisition process. These initiatives address several of the issues this committee is seeking to identify based on its work plan. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. From your testimony, you're making strides, or trying to make strides in the right direction, but I think you're going to find out after today what we've heard around the country, that those strides are very, very small, and they need to be bigger, and we need to figure out a way to break through the DoD, especially for these small and medium-sized businesses, to do more business, to make it easier for them to get the great ideas, products, and services to the warfighter, to the Department of Defense. But I guess the first question I have is your view of doing business with DoD. Is it a market system? Is it a traditional market system that we use? Is that the way we should view it, or is it something different from that in your view?
I say that I read through the previous, and I know most of the previous folks who have been before you, and I tend to agree with most of them. It is wrong, and I think it's a mischaracterization of the department's position that we have this laissez-faire, let the market work. When possible, we prefer to allow the traditional market elements of competition to work. That is not, given the nature of some defense elements, nuclear submarines where there aren't other products, or there are elements of the defense industry where that is not appropriate. And in those certain sectors, in those specific tiers, there is intervention that's necessary and nurturing that's necessary. So where possible and where commercially products are available, we would prefer to allow the market to work.
Right, which makes some sense, but it seems to me that when you're selling to DoD, you got one customer, they regulate, they buy, they tell you which ends up, which ends down, so it becomes very difficult. And could you go into some detail? You mentioned about you tailor some programs to preserve certain segments, and I agree with you. There are certain industries that, they're sunsetted, we don't necessarily need them anymore, or there's people out there, or organizations that are doing a poor job that, we can't save them, we shouldn't. But can you talk about some of those programs that you tailor to preserve some of the segments?
Well, there are a few examples, and I think it goes to the heart of what I understand the task force is trying to get at, and I think the business panel in particular has a unique opportunity to address an area that I think has seen short shrift over the last at least the last decade, which is Andre mentioned, which is the small and medium-sized businesses. At the prime levels, access to capital is not a significant barrier to continuing market performance. At the lower, so you go down the tiers, it becomes more constrained, and then you have things like the CR, the credit crisis, and different ratios that are required of these small businesses. So when we look at a program, you tend to stop, and I think you had CSBA here, and they talked about their look at the prime level. But there's a lot of the analytics stops at the prime level. The real fragility that we're seeing occurring is at those lower tiers where you have a provider or a technology. I'll give one example. Recently in the solid rocket motor industry, we have two providers. They do various things, but we have two prime providers. But both of those primes at a lower level, much lower than just their next tier, rely on a single sub-supplier. So propping up the two primes, while it might be easier because we have more visibility into it, would do little to alleviate the concerns we have at that sub-supplier level. So the real, when we need to intervene in those areas, we try to adjust programs so that we can create sustainable rates of production that are in the best interest of the primes, but also in the best interest of the taxpayer over time.
And don't we need to do that? Well, I think you suggested you need to do it earlier on.
Yes.
Not wait until you get into a situation where it's critical. And that begs the question of having a defense industrial base policy to determine strategically, are there 6, are there 8, are there 10 different segments that we need to make sure that we have the core competency there to build those products that we need, weapon systems that we need.
You're absolutely right. I was charged when I came into the office, in essence, to get the department out of the role of firefighter, waiting for a building to be on fire before we responded. There are a number of mechanisms, it's not just one, that we use. Program managers tend to have a good visibility, but it's a soda straw visibility. We do need greater insight, and I think what this administration has been pursuing through various initiatives like the S2T2, the sector by sector, is to gain insight before we dictate oversight. But you're absolutely right. We need better data at that second and third tier level before we can make these decisions.
And the program managers, it seems to me, I think you said a soda straw.
Absolutely.
They've got to be able to look out wider, and they're pushing to get their program, their project out, with I don't know if they have much concern about the broader implications. If you're looking down a soda straw, they can't see. So how do we change that?
I think it begins with, again, the collection and the sharing of data. I know you received testimony about the great policy we have for Army berets, and that's, but I'm the Force of the Navy ever got that industrial base report. So some of it starts with the simple sharing of data, which my office is charged with doing. The collecting of what those soda straws are looking into at the lower tiers, down to the elements, if you will, of some of these programs, and then try to take those tiers and string that thread across the defense enterprise, so we have a better understanding where we are beginning to see fragility at that lower base that has cascading implications, not just across the program, but across the services as well.
Does that sharing of information include having the program project or program managers talk to the manufacturer? Because we're hearing there's a lot of fear out there that if you're talking to the producer, if you're a program manager, there's going to be some kind of implication. It just seems to me you can't produce something for a customer unless you're talking to them and trying to figure out exactly what they need. Is that?
Absolutely, and I'll let Andre jump in here because I know as small businesses that's particularly difficult. It's having spent 20 years in industry, it's always been a surprise to me that the defense sector is the only one where as you get closer to negotiating the deal, the less you talk to the person you're negotiating with. But that is how the system is set up. But we have redoubled our efforts to do outreach to industry. I've had 300 and some meetings in 2 years that are both on larger meetings, but one-on-one meetings. So we have an active dialogue from the secretary on down with industry to listen to those concerns at the CEO level. But those, again, are at the medium and larger companies. I think your shop has really done a tremendous job in these local centers, going out locally to reach out to the smaller businesses.
Mr. Gudger?
Correct. We have taken an industrious approach to solving the small business industrial-based challenges we have. Just this morning, our office met down at Defense Acquisition University, met with the program managers so that we can better identify what the program managers are seeing, kind of get a front of the requirements that are being developed throughout the department because they have visibility at the level where things begin. for themselves. And I think we're seeing that because in FY11 alone, we've doubled our small business innovation research programs that have gone on to Phase 3 or awards. So doubling that in a very short period of time shows a commitment to from the department and to small business community on creating the essential products and services that we need for the future.
Yeah, and frankly, I don't mind that one of the purposes of the office is to count those numbers, to be sure the goals are being met.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a problem with that. The issue we're looking into is, again, there's so much more capability in the office. Whether you can do it with 30 people or not, it'll be up to you to determine. But there's so much more you can do. In addition to that, in your testimony, you said you made a change earlier this year to the regulations and DFARS about implementing accelerated payments to nearly a third faster. When was that, and what standard are you using that gets you to a third faster on the payments?
Yeah, phenomenal question. I've been
here 10 years. No one ever has mentioned called my questions phenomenal. Thank you very much.
We published the final rule on April 27th of this year, and it essentially it was an area to reduce the barriers and move the bureaucracy.
We've heard this issue from small businesses.
Right. So we solved it with technology. Through our financial system, we essentially didn't need the intervention of people. We took our financial system, and any small business who had a prime contract and a particular financial system, which is the first we updated. We have 14 that we're updating over 18-month period. But we targeted the largest one, MOCAS, which is where 50% roughly of our spend comes from for small business. And on July 1, we implemented mobilized a move where the financial system was updated, and it automatically sent payments out to small business. Didn't have to do anything. And on average, most companies have a net 30 payment day, and we were paying them on an average of net 20. So essentially, for 1/3 of the year, they'll have money in their pocket that they normally would not have.
Mm-hmm. And so these are small businesses who are primes.
Small business prime contracts.
So it doesn't yet apply to small businesses who are subs for a prime contractor, a larger contractor. Is that right?
That's correct. The primes are in charge of paying their subcontractors, but I meet with large businesses as much as I meet with small companies, and I've encouraged them to look at DOD's lead. We're leading something, so look at our lead in this area and encouraging them to be very prudent as they pay small businesses and look to doing that faster and better as well where appropriate.
Another set of issues that we've heard from smaller businesses has to do with auditing. Not that they don't want to be audited, but business in my district, 5 people being audited for work they did a couple of years ago, being audited as if they're a company of 30,000 for a contract that's obviously much, that's big for even them, but unique for the department in terms of work they're doing. And so this issue of auditing as if you're a large prime instead of auditing as if you're just a small business, having to hire people or take people off the job in order to fulfill the auditing requirements. Is that something you've heard through your roundtables?
Oh, absolutely. Certainly have heard that, and we look at this in 2 ways. First, Charlie Williams, who is the director for Defense Contract Management Agency, who oversees a lot of audits now. We're working with his office in a way we haven't before, and we brought this issue up to him, and we're looking at reducing the number of small business audits as they currently stand. Most of it's driven by contract type. So if it's a cost reimbursable contract, it requires an audit. Right. But I've worked with the Defense Procurement and Acquisition Policy Office, and we're looking at, we're encouraging contracting officers and the acquisition workforce to be very cognizant of the type of contracts that they award. Award costs, reimbursable contracts, fixed price contracts, level F contracts where appropriate, and that alone will begin an internal view of reducing the number of audits, and then the ones that require audits, we're going to look at the ones that are what we consider high risk and move them into priority and see if we can reduce the others. So we're looking into it. we're working those issues, and so we are aware. We're making progress.
Okay. Well, we want to continue to understand the progress being made. You mentioned DCMA, Defense Contract Management Agency. What about Defense Contract Auditing Agency, DCAA?
We're working closely with DCA, Pat, I know him well, and we brought this issue to him as well. They're overloaded. We have a high workload with a number of audits, so Defense Contract Management Agency is helping pick up some of the load. So we're working with both of them in the reduction, yes.
All right. We may want to look further, a little further into that. A few more minutes. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Lambert, in your testimony, you talked about the sector by sector, tier by tier, but it intrigued me, so I've looked at your written testimony. You've actually given it a name, S2T2, which means, I guess in defense language, you've given it a program name, so you're actually focused on it. Right. And it's not just some name you're giving it. So talk to us about what specifically, how you're approaching this sector by sector, tier by tier, what it means to you all, and what it will, what kind of outcomes are you looking at from looking at this, looking at the industry from a sector by sector, tier by tier approach, and the implications for the issues at hand that we have.
Absolutely. We realized, again, a couple of years ago when we came in that we had a pretty good understanding at the prime level. So the sectors are the things that you would hear about: aircraft, missiles, ships, the classic sectors that we do the comptroller's budget analysis under. We've added to that under sectors emerging capabilities such as unmanned systems and cybersecurity. And then the tiers are actually down to the component level. So you would have gyros, actuators, all the way down to really elements, if you will, and then so that's the sectors and the tiers is to go down. We're pursuing it along 4 paths. My office is running it, but the first was a study or a survey that we commissioned through the Department of Commerce, which has the authority to have industry respond. We looked at about 25. I saw this was in a previous testimony as well. About 25. We picked 5 programs from each of those sectors that were representative. 3 programs of record, 1 R&D program, and 1 rapid fielding program. And we looked at all the contractors and all the subs that were involved in those programs. And that ended up with about 25,000 contractors. That's how vast that base is. And so we're only talking about a small number of programs, representative programs. We crafted a survey. That survey went out to about 5,000 companies. I have a list of each one in your district, and I can say your district is performing and responding quite well, but they're companies you may not even heard of, because sometimes we hear that they didn't know they were producing products for the Department of Defense. And we're getting those surveys back. We also went along another track to collect.
If I may, I won't speak for the rest of the members, but I'd love to list of my district.
Absolutely. You have 7.
7.
I have them here, yeah. And we then go along and we looked at all of the previous studies that had been done in the department, tried to collect those. We came up with about 105 industrial-based studies that have been done in the last 24 months alone, some larger than others, some repetitive. Tried to get the best information from the soda straws that we could find. We then went out to independent experts and asked them in their specific sectors, space and so forth, to identify what they always hear, the problems with certain components or elements of that particular industrial base. And then we had each service give us a detailee for 6 months that was at the direction of Deputy Secretary Lynn to work with the services to make sure we were reaching out to those program offices. And we're putting all of that information together in a data set that then will become the repository for the department and a basis for which to allow not just individual assessments of the health of the industrial base, the gross anatomy of the industrial base, but also help us as we go through this next chapter of mergers and acquisitions and consolidation so that we understand what it is we're actually approving or having problems with from that very specific elements of the lower tiers.
Okay. That's a great start to an answer. I'll yield back to the chairman.
And we'll probably go back for
round 2 or something.
Round 2.
Thanks a lot.
For those that are interested. With that, Mr. West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and also thanks for the panel for being here today. Couple of questions to start off with. I get very concerned when you look and see a lot of these weapon systems, F-22, AAAV, Crusader, FCS, that all of a sudden we get going down the pipeline, and then the next thing you know, we cancel these programs. And of course, when we're talking about budget cuts, we can't afford to have that too much longer. So when I look at the national military strategy, and I'd like to get your take on this, do we have a national military strategy that really does articulate the requirements of the Department of Defense to the defense industrial base so that they can develop the right type of capabilities and capacities for our military to be effective?
Well, I know that in previous testimony, people have talked about other countries and what they do on the defense industrial base, and we follow those issues pretty closely to actually take what we consider the best from that. I think there's no doubt over the last decade in the program, some of which you mentioned, but many more that you didn't, that where we spent billions and billions of dollars and never produced something. At the end of the day, our manufacturing base requires production. So unless we get into production, a lot of the lower tiers, it's not going to help them to continue to spend money on the research and development. We need to get into production. And in the past, in a permissive budget environment, that covers a lot of sins on both industry side, I think, and the department side, as we were trying to field systems as rapidly as possible. And I think adequate attention probably was not paid out of necessity in some cases to the implications that had on industrial bases. Making what I call our plans based on an EKG chart. You mentioned acronyms. The one that doesn't come off very often in the Pentagon is P&L. And so we ask these companies to build up rapidly and then draw down rapidly, and it's very hard to get a steady state of industrial capabilities there. I think as we've drawn down the last 2 years, my office for the first time is engaged in program reviews. As we go through this budget cycle now, our office is very engaged with CAPE and with the Deputy Secretary now on looking at industrial base implications as we make some of these hard decisions. So I would say it's better than it has been, but not good enough.
Well, when you look at the procurement cycle or system, what type of recommendations or what type of strategies or initiatives is the DoD looking at so we can close some of these long procurement cycles?
Well, I know that it's not in my department. Again, it would within AT&L and the individual services. I know that they're struggling with the fact that we build systems that last for 20 or 30 years. And I know Secretary Lynn was fond of saying that from concept to the first delivery, the iPad took 18 months, and it took him 24 months to get a budget to think about developing the iPad. So there are those inherent difficulties. Again, it varies by sectors. With some sectors that are more mature, such as shipbuilding, it's not as a large of an issue as it is with the IT world, where we need that refresh. And I think the department continues to work and struggle with how we field everything that we need and be flexible enough to get the systems of the warfighter as quickly as possible. Part of that, we saw some capabilities like the MRAP, I think, is a good example of where when the department, when there's an urgent requirement, and in this case, I think when the secretary became the program manager, we did move much more aggressively and quickly to field those systems. And I think we're still learning the lessons from the last 5 years at least on how to do that better across the department.
Mr. Cudger?
Yes.
Okay. See, I got it right, Mr. Chairman. Southerners are smarter than those.
You've been practicing longer.
But anyhow, what are we doing? I know about the rapid equipping force, but are there other strategies or things that we're using so that we can go in and pull off those commercial off-the-shelf technologies so that we can get a lot of this out to our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen a lot quicker?
Oh, absolutely. We are working very closely with the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. And one of the key programs under that portfolio is the Rapid Fielding Portfolio, where we're looking at developing things that will take somewhere between 6 months and 2 years, which is a more rapid acquisition process in the department. And our office have engaged them in a way, and we're working in some particular programs there where we're looking at where they poll the entire defense internal stakeholder base on where they're going, where they see the future, what capabilities do they want to have in a 6 month or 24-month period, and we're making that available to the small business. And we're appropriate if we see that they are one of our, let's say, SIBR awardees. We're looking at how do we then award them the opportunity in a much more streamlined way. And we've had some early success there where they had a need, they had a capability. We had a company who had received one of our Phase 2 awards, and it was more of making the company available to them where they could bend it slightly and then rapidly acquire for it. And so we're seeing some successes there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. And with that, Ms. Hanabusa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gudger, you said something earlier. You said you want to be able to forecast better for the military for 2020. And this has always been the major question, which is, what is the military for 2020? So when you say you're going to forecast better for the military for 2020, what is your vision of the military for 2020?
Well, I'm not at liberty to have a vision. I definitely support Secretary Panetta's vision, and that's and it's broad. It's a broad stroke, and it's and Deputy Secretary Carter. It is to have the most powerful military on the face of the earth in that year. And my remarks was if we forecast better now and give our industrial base a chance to create the capabilities that today don't exist for tomorrow, then in that year we will have a much more powerful military and national security posture. And the study that we commissioned was to look at a forecasting better. How can we take what the program managers and the program executive offices throughout the department, all these requirements, what they see that their needs would be in the future, and bring them together in a way that not just small businesses, but all businesses can understand them. It's clear where we may be going. It's made available to them sooner. And so the study was to look at best practices, look at ways of sharing information and data, so that if, for lack of a better term, if the Navy had a requirement that the Army was also developing, maybe we could look at working together closer in a streamlined way to produce the desired outcome.
Mr. Gudger, that's part of the problem, right? I mean, you want to work together and you want to come up with a better program, and we're talking like now maybe 9 more years into the future, and unless there is somebody who has that vision, a clear vision, what's the time for a small business person from the time you have an understanding of what it is that we're going to need to the point where you put that out or you help them get an understanding of that, and what exactly do you do for small business so that they can then meet that demand in 2020? We heard testimony that some of our big projects takes 15 years to get there. And in a prior hearing, I thought the organization CSIS had a gentleman come before us who I thought said it really well. He says policy is really set by acquisition. How we acquire determines our policy versus our policy determining how we acquire. Because if we continue to buy certain kinds of fighter jets or certain kinds of equipments or continue to build a certain way with a 15-year lead time, that's going to determine that military in the year 2020 or into the future. So how do you intend to help small business when that's really been the, for lack of a better description, that's been the way our modus operandi has been?
I agree that 10 and 15-year programs are unacceptable, and I know Dr. Carter has a big focus on that not being acceptable. And what we're doing for a small business in this area, we're doing a host of things, but one in particular thing I can mention is like a Rapid Innovation Fund, where we have taken department urgent needs and made them available to small businesses and looking to rapidly acquire for them. And I think that this is a great example, illustration of the level of attention that the leadership in the department is paying to small business, understanding and recognizing the dynamic role they play, and working with our office in a way and engaging.
Mr. Gudger, I don't want to interrupt you, but let me tell you something. One of the things that I hear you saying is that because we don't have a clear focus, it almost seems like, well, 15 years is about how long it takes us to build a fighter. So what you're almost relegating small business to do certain kind of work that you think it's going to have an immediate demand and immediate work. So you don't see small business really participating in the long term for the bigger projects? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
No, my number one goal is to make available expeditiously any opportunity that is a maximum practical opportunity for small business. And that's exactly what we're doing. Traditionally, small businesses have not built tankers or ships or fighter jets.
But they've subcontracted.
But they do
part of the process.
They do subcontract.
They have challenges as a result of that, right?
Absolutely.
So are you looking at that as part of what you're looking at?
Oh, absolutely.
Then you've got to look at 15 years potentially in the process, and how are you going to insert the small business into that?
Absolutely.
So you are looking at that?
Absolutely.
So when we get your roundtable report, we'll see that in that report?
I will make, yes, anything that addresses any portion of the industrial base on short or long-term programs, we are looking at ways to address those, and you'll see it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We're going to probably do the second round if anybody has interest in it. And with that, Mr. Runyon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Mr. Granger, you mentioned in your opening statement about the memo from Secretary Panetta, kind of setting some benchmarks, have you? Are they much different from standard operating procedure from before, or is he just trying to plant that seed again in everyone's mind?
I think it goes a step beyond the standard operating procedure for the simple fact that it never happened before, so there is no benchmark against it. But in addition to that, at the time, Undersecretary Carter sent out a memo with actionable items that was addressed to all of the acquisition and technology logistic workforce, and also he provided a copy to encourage the military secretaries to also adopt very similar things. And those actionable items are materializing. In fact, one of the actionable items was to put in small business criteria and performance evaluation of seniors that affect the outcome of acquisition, and that's happening. So we're looking at the actual items that went out. So it went beyond just the memo. It looked at key things that we must accomplish in order to reach this end state, whether it's 1 year out or 15 years out. These actionable items are to address the short term and long term, and there's been significant progress there. When we look at our tracking numbers, we look at our total percentages for small business and prime contracting opportunities, and we look at FY fiscal year 10, because 11 is still settling. But when we look at 10, we actually, dollar-wise, looking at the goals that we had, we actually met the total dollars that should have gone to small business. I think that's a testament to, one, what we're doing, and two, what the future may hold as we continue to push forward and increase our prime contracting numbers.
Well, in your view of that percentage, though, I mean, can it grow drastically more?
I would like to say that it's encouraging good behavior. Drastically more, I'm uncertain of drastic more.
Okay. Is there, and in reaching a lot of these, I'm sure the list is long, and I won't ask you to go through a lot of them, but just off the top of your head, a few of them. And are there any roadblocks, regulations that you have noticed so far that have kept you from proceeding with any of them?
No, I don't see any huge roadblocks. In fact, one of the actual items was a bi-weekly meeting with our office, or with me, with all of the acquisition executives for services and components. I invite them in, which includes the head of contracts, and we together develop strategies, and we share these best practices with them on what we're doing in the department to make this happen, to meet our goals. And one of the actionable items as a best practice, we had a threshold of small business directors and specialists sitting on peer reviews, which is the review of the acquisition process. And so a best practice was to that our office put out, so reduce that number, and we set on all peer reviews of over $500 million or more. So the large acquisitions where small business need to be included in, we look and see if a portion of it can be set aside for small business, and if it's not possible, we then have started to put in language where we're requiring the prime contractors to meet a certain subcontract number for small businesses. So that's inclusive of any opportunity, planned acquisition, $500 million or more. And so that's a success story. We're actively engaged in them. We've been successful in breaking pieces out for small business to participate in, and we certainly have been very successful in ensuring that small business have a required minimum contracting goal inside of the larger plan acquisitions.
And I know specifically myself, I've had 3 different service-disabled veterans in my district reach out to me
Yes.
that are having issues getting DOD contracts themselves, and I'm sure a few of them will be part of the panel that we're having December 9th back in the district, and it is having that discussion with them that, you have the DOD itself has its 3% mandate, and a lot of times it's not being fulfilled, and, it's the reason why we're here, and with that, Chairman, I yield back.
Guys?
Thank you. Go ahead if you want.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that. I mean, service-able veteran community although I have to say that, I care about all the programs equally, that is one that's near and dear to my heart. In fact, that was the first study I commissioned when I got in this position, was the study on reducing the barriers for service-disabled veteran-owned business and veteran-owned businesses. And there's a silver lining in our cloud of DOD. Yes, I was disappointed when I took this position that we have not met that goal. But in FY11, we have already, since I've taken post, we've already increased our service-disabled veteran-owned contracting by $500 million since March of this year. And we're going to continue to do better. The numbers have been growing year over year, but that's the single largest jump we've had in the last 3 years. And we have a continued focus on that particular community. And I've performed, a lot of my outreach events have been with the service-disabled veteran-owned community. And I am the co-lead on the Veteran Task Force for Employment for Entrepreneurship Subgroup. And in fact, I reached out to the service-disabled veteran-owned community, a few groups in name like VetForce. I brought them in and made them members of my subgroup so that we could get the best ideas, and the best ideas would be heard, and show them that not only are we going to talk about doing better, we are going to do better. It's going to be inclusive environment, inclusive of their ideas. So,
What did you identify some of the biggest barriers? You said you did a study and you found...
The study is actually still ongoing.
Okay, so
but yes, some of the biggest barriers is the current industrial base for where the urgent needs and the things that the department buy. Actually having certified service-disabled veteran-owned businesses with the capability to perform those functions. When we look at the industrial base, it's the smallest group. And so when we look at how much money we spend and how we spend it, there's simply not enough companies there to participate across the board in all the things we do. Yes, they do certain industries well, but we're working with them. That's the reason why we're forecasting better, making our urgent needs more available by way of our website, and kind of helping them set the tone and direction for the things that they need to develop, whether it's a product or a service.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sutton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lambert, on page 6 of your testimony, you make a couple of statements I'd just like to get clarification on. You say companies exist to make money, and without the potential, no one would be competing to win defense contracts. That's understandable. Everyone gets that. And then at the end of the next paragraph, you say, in the high budget environments of the past, many companies have grown to expect high margins independent of the quality of their performance. When I read that sentence, it's concerning to me. How did that happen? And in the first instance, could you just expand on that for me?
Sure. I think, as I said before, not just in this cycle, but in the 4 previous cycles we've seen in defense budgets, when we went and looked at the past lessons, a permissive budget environment does cover a lot of sins, and that is a permissive budget environment. It's important to remember because of the requirements of conducting 2 ongoing operations that we faced. But I think it would be hard to argue with the fact that when we had programs in trouble, or were bleeding, we tended to cauterize that wound with money because we needed the program, we needed to get it fielded because it was important to the warfighter. And in that process, I think a lot of, or some discipline went out of the system. That was the entire point of Dr. Carter's Better Buying Power Initiative and the Efficiency Initiative, was to return that balance. So when we look at the financial ratios of the leading primes and some of the other defense companies, they grew quite substantially over this period of time, understandably, again, and there wasn't much differentiation. And I think what we're trying to restore now is a balance of rewarding with better profitability those companies which perform well, while making it clear to those who don't that the expected profitability that they may have had in past years is not like it will not continue.
Okay, and if I could just get a little more information and help in quantifying what you talk about on page 7, and I know there have been questions about this, the effort that you are undertaking to map and assess the industrial base sector by sector, tier by tier. Can you just tell me, can you quantify how much, how far along you are,
Sure.
given the massive amount that you have to deal with?
Yes, it is a massive amount, and that's why it's important that as we do this, it is not a study, it's a continued effort to collect data that will continue to be refreshed, probably with deep dives every quarter in different sectors. But of the roughly 5,500 surveys, we'll start with that were sent out, more than half have been returned, and we're going through. There were 17 in your district. And we're going through those. We work with the companies to fill them out. Happy to share it with anyone who cares what the survey looks like. It's quite comprehensive. So some of the initial results are affecting some of the budget decisions, or at least showing early signs of fragility. We have been tasked to get some early product up to the Secretary's office by the end of November, and so we're working toward that goal. The studies, the independent studies we've done have all been concluded, and we're integrating those. The studies that my staff have done have all been concluded, and now we're continuing to work with the services to collect the information they have, and some of the services have been great in responding.
And I would like to avail myself of accessing some of that.
Absolutely.
Okay, and could I just ask you, and actually I'd like both of you to think about this, are issues of guarding proprietary information and intellectual property hindering the development of our industrial policy? And if so, what are those issues, and how are you dealing with them? Just a small question.
Is it specifically related to data rights? Is that, or intellectual or who owns the data from the contractors or the government?
I think it's your choice. I think it's all of those things.
Yeah, it's a complicated question. And certainly we have it with some of the independent research and development that companies themselves pursue, and that we reimburse the question of who owns that data. I think, again, over time, lines have been blurred. There is a group working on that inside of AT&L. I've been in the meetings. I'm not part of the official group about how do we better define who owns what property at what stage. And the goal of that is really pretty straightforward. If the government owns the data and the rights to a component of a major system, we then have the opportunity at a future time to compete that component, to bring in new competitors, to introduce competition. And this is what's important the department to understand, and for everyone to understand about competition. It doesn't have to be symmetrical competition. It can be asymmetrical competition at a later stage, or a different component or a different product. We have an example that we brought of a product that we funded through the Title III program that changed the way we're building ammunition, but it's also helped the medical community. That's something we're inserting into a program after the fact. So then data rights do become an issue, because we want to make sure if the taxpayer paid for this equipment, if it paid for the production, and if we were paying for the maintenance of it, we own the data, so that if the company decides to go in a different direction down the road and decides not to service the department, or if we want to introduce competition at a later stage, we reserve that right.
Well, I agree with Mr. Lambert. I'm a part of the meetings, although I'm not one of the owners. The department's certainly moving in the direction that we're building on standards. And these standards will allow us to, no matter if we want to introduce competition and buy better and look to become more efficient in the future, it'll allow us to create and produce the competition. For small business industrial base, it is somewhat a challenge for a lot of small business who are very concerned about intellectual property and protecting intellectual property. And that's one of the areas in our office that we're now looking at. It's a new thing for us in our office to take on intellectual property rights and ensuring that intellectual property is protected as it relates to small business. We haven't seen any major issue or any issue since I've taken position, but we understand that it could be a potential challenge in the future.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just say, because we've heard this issue come up in the context of small business, so I'd really love to understand more what you're doing. You said this is new, so if you could expand on that at a later time, I would appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. We are meeting with industry now to understand all the things all the issues they have and what's bothering them, so we can craft a response and a way of helping assist them in this area. So I'll be more than happy to come back and make the data available to you.
Mr. Lambert, am I to understand that you're an industrial-based person, you're not participating in the discussions?
No, we participate. There's a group that was formed to follow up on the Better Buying Power Initiative, which is called a senior integration group that Dr. Carter convened a year and a half ago and was meeting weekly on Saturdays for many, many months as we went through this process. And we continue to be part of that. There are subgroups as part of that leadership team, 15 or 20 people, but then there are subgroups who solely have different responsibilities. I'm not on the subgroup that's doing the data rights or the intellectual property, but they report back to this senior
So you're
integrated group.
participating?
That's right.
I think as Ms. Sutton said, that's a reoccurring theme we hear, and some people even said that I don't know if we've had anybody before us that said, we're not going to do business because if we have to give up our intellectual property rights, they can, we'll take it elsewhere.
Absolutely. It's part of our issues that we deal with on commercialization. I'd also say that one of the areas where we're completely aligned with industry, and we both need to do a better job, is in the protection of our own intellectual property from theft and from some of the cyber issues we've been seeing. And that is we can quibble with who owns the intellectual property for a widget, but we can all agree that we don't want that intellectual property going to third parties who don't have a claim to it legally.
Okay. And with that, Mr. Schilling, recognized. Questions?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. I'm actually kind of impressed because we've got some folks that are actually doing some studies, and rather than throwing them into a file cabinet, they're reaching around and doing some things about it. So, to me, it's we're to the point as a nation with the budgets going on is that, and with the threats that are out there, is that we have to be doing something. It's not we should, it's that we need to and we have to. But I wanted to kind of touch base. Mr. Runyon had brought this up. I got the opportunity to speak at the U.S. Chamber yesterday, and I took questions at the end, and the first question was a veteran, and he brought up exactly what we were talking about here. And you answered most of it, and I think it's great that you're taking that head on. But also the women-owned small businesses also, and then one of the things is I was kind of curious as to why maybe they missed those goals. And then we know you're doing something differently about it now, which is great. But then, is there anything that we can do legislatively to help you guys to push that forward?
One of the things that would help us tremendously. In fact, the Chamber recognized us for our outstanding performance with women-owned business not too long ago, actually about a month ago. So we're happy that we've made tremendous strides there and that they've recognized us for those strides. What we can do in the future is to really focus on the reauthorization of our key programs. Mentor Protege, SIBR, in our STTR tech transfer. That's where there's a lot of opportunity, not for just women, but service disabled, but there's a lot of opportunity there for them. And with that, if we could focus on the reauthorization of our programs, I think that we can continue to foster an environment where we're maturing and growing. Some of the micro businesses to become small and small to become, to grow and be successful. It's a success story when they grow outside of the size standard. So I think that's one of the key things that we could focus on in FY12.
Very good. And then, when we talk to the small businesses, one of the things that they have, of course, a problem with is capital. And, what is the Department of Defense doing for the small guy visibility to, the lower tier folks to help them get out there in front and maybe highlight their business, since they don't have the money to do the marketing, what might be needed? I guess either one of you might be able to answer that one.
Good.
Yeah. I think we kind of initiated about 3 or 4 things that we're doing. One is there's a memo that went out from the Undersecretary encouraging the contract and acquisition workforce to host outreach events in FY12. Continue them on. We started them in FY11, but they were successful, so to continue it on, because that is a way of meeting businesses that we traditionally don't have, or we don't have as a supplier. That's the way to get to new vendors and increase our industrial base, which is key. Some of the other things that we're doing to assist with that is to look at businesses that have been successful and making our mentor program available to the successful businesses, where they can work with either new entrants or current businesses who are doing business Department of Defense and want to do more business with the department. We see that as a successful way of doing a cross-transfer of capability and skills. So we're encouraging them to team together so that they can offer unique capability in a way than they haven't done before. So that's a huge encouragement, and we've seen that starting to happen. In fact, one of the smaller Department of Army contracts were kind of combined the two, and then those two companies came together, and they ended up winning a much larger effort because of that encouragement of, why don't you guys look at putting your capabilities together and do something unique for the department, offer us a great capability at a reduced cost. And so we're happy to see that kind of thing happening.
Very good. And then, Mr. Lambert, so we kind of got the competition part of this out of the way, but how do we, first off, how many do I have in the 17th district?
Oh, let me see. I think you had 9, I think.
Oh, we're going to have to get to work.
Yeah, I'll get your list here.
Okay. But the DOD, how do they determine when there are strategic gaps and shortfalls, in the defense base, industrial base?
Well, it's an issue, and historically it's been when something's gone wrong, and that typically occurs whenever there's a break in production and subcomponents, the capability to manufacture atrophies, or the people go out of business. It's not just the plant, but it's the physical, it's the design teams and the other elements that are so vital to our industrial base. And in the past, if a program office doesn't manage and there are varying degrees of success at that level, then we end up costing more, sometimes delaying entire programs that can then result in the spiral of death that everyone is familiar with. What we're trying to change with the S2T2 database is to create this repository where we could go in early and we could pull those threads. So if you had an Army program, as the case was in the solid rockets, that was maybe changing their behavior in accordance with the direction given to them by the program manager and the service itself, but it was going to have a cascading effect across the other services or the other departments, then we need as OSD to come in and try to align that, and that has the benefit of creating stable production. I mean, one of the issues I think that Congressman West raised earlier, I'm not sure if we're as bad at planning for our industry as some would allude to. I think we give fairly good visibility compared to other industrial sectors as to where we're going. Where we fall down is in the execution, the starts and the stops, the non-transparency, and the EKG charts of production numbers. If we can give industry transparency through communications and make that our desires and our plans and back it up with execution clear to industry and to the financial community, we find that the markets tend to work and companies tend to get the investments they need. It's when we don't do that that we see these instabilities, particularly at the second and third tier levels.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. We're going to go for a second round of questions and start with Mr. Larson.
Thank you. Just first, I want to make a broader point about the panel, at least in my view, because it wasn't clear in my opening statement. Just that as we get into a budget-constrained environment, it's extremely important that these small and medium-sized businesses still have an opportunity to participate in contracting, because they are still going to be there to be able to provide innovation, services, products to the warfighter through the Pentagon. So it's extremely important that at least in my view, we stay focused on that. Second point I want to make about IP is that about IP. We heard views from folks in my district where they actually developed proprietary information as part of a contract for one of the services. But in order to compete for that, they had to hand that over to the service in order for the service to write the requirements so they can go out and compete in the broader community, thereby, legally transferring this protected intellectual property to the rest of the market. So there's nothing nefarious about it except that the rules work against the company who developed the intellectual property. And that ends up obviously being to the detriment of the company itself. So those 2 points. And there's a question, Mr. Geyser, on SBIR and the tech transfer. Can you answer the so what question? That is, what impacts are there when we do a 30 or 60 or 90-day reauthorization to SBIR and tech transfer versus a 1 year or 2 year or 3 year authorization?
Long-term authorization is always better for small business because it allows them to make the investment and feel more comfortable making the investment. Small companies have a much more difficult time with the start, stop, and go, and then the uncertainty. So they're very reluctant to making the investment in developing technologies, or because the program may not be around to continue to fund them. And then the second thing that bothers or hampers small business in a way that is much different than a larger base is the lack of direction when that happens. When programs are short-term reauthorized, small business are not quite sure if this is a sign that a program is going to go away, whether the technology will be of interest to the department. If it's reauthorized longer term, will the department go in a different direction? These things hamper them from making the investment that we would like to see them make to create the capability we want. And many small businesses say, hey, if the government doesn't believe long term in the program or the product, then it's very difficult for me to. And so that's a challenge.
All right. I have something for Mr. Lambert here, but just one new area for the department, relatively new area, is the emphasis on renewable energy and the role renewable energy can play in our national security. And I know hearing from folks, again, where I come from, it's a great direction to go. There's maybe not as much, there's maybe not as much transparency because it's just sort of still feeling out how smaller businesses can help out the department in that effort. So I'll just keep that in mind. If you just keep that in mind. Mr. Lambert, I understand that you have an example of a small business innovation that you had brought. Can you talk about that and perhaps play a little show and tell?
Sure, there are a couple. One is, actually, I came over yesterday to see them. They're not as small as they used to be, but the department invested through our Title III authorities in a company down in North Carolina.
Defense Production Act.
Defense Production Act, that's correct. We were actually looking for silicon carbide for some weapon systems, but it had the tertiary benefit of enabling commercial technology, and in fact the LED lights in the Rayburn cafeteria are derived from this, were purchased from this company, who are now producing them for commercial purposes. You can buy them at Home Depot, but that was an example of where we need innovative technology that, because as I say, it was everyone's problem, therefore it was nobody's problem. But once you could get the department engaged, and with our buying power, we did Wedge 5 at the Pentagon with these lights, and now you're using them in the cafeteria, and they're quite nice, as I found out. The other company is a small firm. I'll leave these with you. I was happy. I don't think I can take them out again.
I'm surprised you got them in.
Yeah, well, it wasn't easy, apparently, just so you know. That's right. This is a polymer. The net effect of this has a lot of commercial medical applications, but nobody was investing in it. And this was a small company down in Mississippi that did this polymer insert into a 50 caliber round. The practical effect of this, and to think about it, if you're a Marine humping these things at 10,000 feet, they're 30% less weight. They've actually increased accuracy, and we've injected molded and made them drop in so that they are now, if you think about the cascading effects that small base has, we can load more of them on a pallet. It requires less fuel to transport them, therefore there are fewer convoys, therefore there are fewer casualties. All of this because of a simple, relatively simple, the company wouldn't say it, but idea that the Department of Defense funded through our Title III authorities. That now has implications. They're doing these injected moldings with the polymers. They're looking at medical applications. These are the kinds of things that if the department, just like in our Mantech programs where we get a 10-for-1 return on investment, when you talk about forward-leaning and thinking about what we need to do next, not just as a department, but as a nation in terms of manufacturing, these are the kinds of real applications that I think the department can be proud to point to and say, there's a guy somewhere over in Afghanistan that's lightened his load because of this polymer, and probably 10 years from now, there's somebody going to be on an operating table that's going to survive because of these polymers.
Yeah, thanks. I'll have to defer to the chairman, Mr. Geyser. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I couldn't.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, you brought something.
Yeah, I couldn't let.
Well, I want to make sure that the polymer has medical benefit, not that round.
No, that's right. Right. No, that's correct.
Opposite of the
Right,
medical benefit.
right.
Yeah.
Just to show you how well we coordinate together, I couldn't let Brett play show and tell without me. So I brought the body armor that a small business made to stop that 50 caliber round. In fact, this was made by a company called M-Cubed, and it was made in an urgent requirement in the field in Afghanistan and Iraq for the need for body armor and to sustain multiple blasts from IEDs and other munition. And a small company made this, and now it's and they're a subcontractor. They don't do this prime contract. They provide the armor that fits into other polymers that are bent and made for other pieces of the body. But this is a great and phenomenal thing that small business do, and it was as an example of our SIBR success story.
Okay, super, yeah.
Is that ceramic?
No, it's made from iron, carbon, and silicone.
Okay. Ms. Hanabusa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Lambert, how many do I have in my district?
You have, it looks like one.
Oh, I have one?
Sorry. But that's the one we found, so if you tell us more.
I have Hawaii.
Yeah.
That's right. They keep reminding me that. Mr. Goodger, the question that I've asked at all of these meetings has been about SBIR and small business, and I noticed that you interface with small business administration, and I think you could see like on page 9 of your report. So what I'm trying to understand is because Mr. Larson has told me very clearly about the jurisdictions between the SBA and DOD. So I want to understand from your perspective what and how you work together, because you're asking for reauthorizations and so forth, and that may not be our issue. So can you tell me first what your role is with relation to the SBA, and also in terms of SBIR, whether when the grants are being reviewed, what your role is in that process, if any.
Okay.
And was that body armor phase 2 SBIR?
Yeah, it went phase 2 and went on to phase 3. It became a program that was.
Aren't you impressed that I'd even know that?
Yeah, I'm great.
Anyway, can you answer those questions, please?
Yes, I roll with the SBA. SBA has a statutory requirement for the overall small business, and they also are the administrator of the overall Small Business Innovation Research Program. However, our program is standalone, and it's based on the reauthorization from Congress, and typically it takes both the House and Senate to reauthorize the program from my seat. Now, when we do receive SIBR applications, we get thousands of them every year, tens of thousands of them every year, and we award a few thousand every year, depending on the need. So on average, 4,000 we get that we award, and on average, we receive about 14,000 applications. We're very instrumental in that process. The Office of Small Business Program have a program manager that oversees the program for the Office of Secretary of Defense, and work jointly with the Research and Engineering Directorate, Assistant Secretary, and along with the Service SIBR program managers to ensure successful administration of the program and that the urgent needs to the department are fulfilled.
So when you say you award, your department or your office awards, I think you're an office.
Yes.
Are you awarding SBIR grants?
Yes, we award phase 1 and phase 2 grants out of our office.
And what role does the SBA play if you're awarding the SBIR grants?
They play no role in our awards at all.
So SBIR, as I understand it, it's about 50-something% of their money is actually defense because it's a percentage of the budget, right? So do you get to control over the whole 50-something% of the money that SBIR has?
No, the SBI program is a percentage of the total DoD budget, and it's a small percentage, but 1.5% now, I believe, and which represents just about $1.5 billion. And our office oversees the broad agency announcements that go out 5 times a year, and we collect information, and we arrange with our other component agencies on selecting successful awardees that meet the requirements outlined in the broad agency announcement.
So you actually award all of the SBI, because my understanding is SBIR's total funding is from basically all contracts, all budgets. But you do control the SBIR component that's funded through the DoD budget, a percentage of the DoD budget.
Yes, I'm responsible for that industrial base, and we work very closely with the services and successfully awarding these.
So the mentor protege program, which we heard about, what's the funding source for that?
That's also a congressional reauthorization, and it's a relatively small amount compared to the other programs in defense, where it's between $20 to $25 million annually. But it is a significant job creator in the department. It's phenomenal for a small business to also gain capability in developing infrastructure for the company so they can move on to be successful suppliers to the department.
But isn't the assumption that somehow they're going to move forward with the mentor, which is usually a larger defense contractor? Mm-hmm. So they kind of get gobbled up in a way.
Yeah, the consolidation of the industrial base is a challenge everywhere. That is very true. But we look at that as a success story. We don't penalize them for growth. In fact, if they gain a capability in the department, as long as they continue to stay in front of it, I think there's no reason why we wouldn't continue to work with them in some fashion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Gudger, you don't do Phase 3, correct?
Correct.
That has to be supported by the acquisition by one of the services, is that correct?
Well, Phase 3 are not just solely the services. It could be the component agencies as well. But Phase 3, it becomes a much larger program. We look to help them develop in the Phase 1, the feasibility, and then...
Do you drop off then after Phase 2? You have no say in the matter at Phase 3 because... I'm sure there's some things if you talk about, I don't know how the UAVs were earmarked. If they had gone through the SBIR process, I'm pretty sure the Air Force would have said, nah, we're not going to do it. There's no pilots on that thing. So are you involved in Phase 3 at all? Do they consult with you? Do you have the ability to say, this is pretty good stuff. We got to figure out some way how to move this forward. Are you done after Phase 2?
Somewhat of a complicated answer because it depends on the technology and the need in the department, but we certainly kind of go through the entire portfolio of OSD and look at successful Phase 2 and match them up with program managers who may want to buy that technology or services who may have that need. They pick up and award the contract directly to them, but we make information available to them through our database, and we continue to track them and track the success in future years. Yes, we do.
Okay. Because there may be products that cost up front is big, and you get one of the services to say no, but if you guys are looking at it saying, look, but over the next 20 years we could save millions or billions of dollars, it makes some sense to keep pushing that. So with that, Ms. Sutton? Okay. And final questions I have. We get a sense out there when we're talking to in our field hearings with these smaller businesses, and even I think with the tier 1 primes, there's a sense of hostility between DoD and contractors, and some of it comes about because of the media picks up on a $500 hammer or a couple $1,000 toilet seat, which I think there were both space shuttle problems, but it's still and the media pounds on it, and as I recall, the space shuttle toilet seat, if you go back years, they only made like 5 of them, and they were out of a very specific. So it costs a lot of money to make them. You couldn't just, go down to the Home Depot and get one. But so the media does some of that, but I think the Department of Defense has some culpability in creating this tension when we've got to figure out a way to, work together, whether we're talking about the communications, which we talked a little bit about here earlier, the audits, and the communications, not being able to talk, as you mentioned, the closer you get to the contract, you got to stop talking to your customer, which is crazy. So your view is, can we solve this hostility problem? I mean, I think it's a huge hurdle that we have to overcome. And I don't know if we can legislate to stop it, if we got to break the culture somewhere at DoD to stop it.
It's very much a culture, and I was surprised, frankly, when I came in. I think what we've tried to do over the last few years is within the leadership explain very clearly that despite spending about $1.5 billion a day, we don't make anything. And without our industry partners, we can't field an army. Dr. Carter started by having an open door policy. Secretary Lynn did, and Secretary Gates. I've conducted over, as I said, 300 meetings, either individually or with groups and associations like NDIA for the second and third tiers, AIA for the larger ones, and then with individual companies. And it really is trying to get that message out there that we need to better communicate, to be more transparent. And that's we send memos out to that effect, but the practical pushing that down is a real challenge within the department, and one that I have to give a lot of credit to both Dr. Carter and Frank Kindle. It doesn't get any press. But they spend as much time going internally to the buying commands, preaching that message of cooperation and working with industry to get best value for the taxpayer and warfighter than they do going to the companies themselves. And I think I've seen a tremendous change in just the last 18 months as you work down that process. But it's very much an internal process we're working through.
Mr. Geyser, you have any?
Oh, absolutely. Being a former business owner, I walked in with a certain bias to the department and understanding the challenges that we faced. And I thought I would do something that would help alleviate that challenge for small business. And I understood that how do you engage a culture and modernize a culture without baking small business industrial base into the process early. So we're making tremendous strides there. In fact, I look at doing that through training. So our office created a small business training course that program managers must take now in order to receive their program management certification. So they understand the small business space. They understand how to look for innovative technologies. They look at bringing them in the process doing certain milestone reviews. We created a tool called MaxPrac, which is the other part. It's the cornerstone to alleviating small business issues. They say, hey, I just want a fair chance. So MaxPrac is the maximum practical opportunity tool that we developed, and we share with other agencies throughout the government. I think we shared it with about 17 other agencies, where it's a market research-driven tool where we can find opportunities where we're currently engaged in a small company. Let's say it's in the Army, for example, and the Navy is not engaged in that company and maybe paying more for that resource, or it's going to a large company. We now have a tool where we can identify it and compare it to other services or agencies in the department or against other agencies in the government, so that, one, we can buy better and reduce costs, and two, promote competition or promote the ability for opportunities to be competed in the future amongst small businesses. We're taking an analytical approach to this. And then on the other side, that's the prime contracting side. On the subcontracting side, looking at long term, we have looked at in the acquisition process, influencing what we call weighted factors, which is all things being equal in a planned acquisition, that the prime contractor for that, whether large or small, if they have met small business criteria that they outlined in previous contracts, all things being equal, small business is consideration for who will get that award in the source selection. And then it ultimately goes, once you are awarded, then your we affect the fee construct if you don't continue to meet those goals. So it's providing incentive, one, on provide market research from a prime contracting opportunity, and then two, looking at it from a subcontracting opportunity over long term, ensuring that we give consideration to small business for subcontract opportunities where the primes have done well, and then if they don't do well, we can have some accountability through fee construct.
And how's a max prac?
Yes.
How does that initiate? Who initiates that?
It's administered by office. All of our small business directors and specialists throughout the Department of Defense have a copy. We've trained all of our head of contracts, and we're working it downstream to all of our contracting officers. We have 27,000 in our acquisition workforce, and we started this initiative, this analytical approach this year, probably in May of this year. I launched it at our annual conference in New Orleans, and it's starting to help us produce significant, I would say, strides in accomplishing our goals.
So your contracting officers initiate that not a private sector company doesn't come up and say, hey, I can provide the same product to a different service?
We look two-pronged approach. We meet with businesses all the time where we can buy better, and then when it's time to conduct market research, which is part of our acquisition process, this is when we use the tool. So one, we can get it from industry and outreach events, and two, we have a tool that help us look at a mountain of data and make sense out of it pretty quickly.
Right. Mr. Lambert, you also said that you're rewarding companies for better quality. It's contrary to everything I hear. It's, my goodness, it's heresy by giving somebody a bonus for doing a great job in the government.
Well, again, it goes to the trying to place incentives in a direction that truly incentivizes instead of punishing. And it is true that in the world that we're coming from, I think quite often it was the question was how to reduce profitability, not how to increase it as a motivating tool. And I think Dr. Carter and Mr. Kendall have been clear upon that. But I think to your point, Congressman, it's not so much the profitability of the primes. The worst thing that would happen is if we hurt the profitability at the prime level, that's surely going to cascade down to the subs, just as it did in the auto industry, and that's the last thing we want to be encouraging. So it's a very short-term solution to a long-term problem, and we just can't allow program offices and departments to run programs and operations that way. We won't have a base if we do that approach.
Right. And my final question is, how many companies in my district on your list?
In your district? Well, your district is strange, but I've
been told that before.
Because you have a lot of different things. But there's one that was on the survey. But I know of several others that are close by that that have a lot of people that live in the district.
Yeah. Well, they say that a member of Congress is a reflection of his district. So I've been strange before too.
Well, it's an important one, if that's helpful.
Thank you. I really appreciate you being here today. You've said a lot of positive things, and I don't doubt that you're making strides. And you, Mr. Grunger, you've been there for several months, but what we're hearing out there when we go into the business community is a different story. So hopefully, with your efforts and what we're trying to do here, we can push that out, because I think the defense industrial base is so critical. I don't believe that it's a traditional market system like we have in other things, and we've got to make sure we're making the right strategic decisions so that down the road, the next enemy, the next war we fight, we have all the right stuff on the shelf to be able to provide for a warfighter. So, again, I really appreciate you coming in today, and we look forward to continuing to talking with you as we move down the road. And you're going to provide us with, as Mr. Larson requested, your roundtable feedback so we can see if it matches up. So we would appreciate that greatly. So, again, thank you all very much for being here. Thanks, members, for being here, and the audience for being here. Hearing is adjourned.